George Brian Brummell, famously known simply as Beau, was born on the 7th of June 1778 in Downing Street, London. His family history and background were quite unusual for the time, as it's a testament to social mobility, something uncommon back in the 18th century. His grandfather, William Brummell, worked as a valet to a politician. Eventually, he managed to save up enough money to buy a house with various apartments and lived there with his family. To earn more money, William and his wife rented apartments on the upper floors of the house. On one occasion, a member of parliament rented an apartment and liked it very much. After getting to know the family a bit, the MP offered William's son, also called William but known as Billy, a position for him as a clerk. Billy would then go on to work as private secretary for Lord North, who then became Prime Minister in the year 1770 until 1782. When Lord North was no longer in office, Billy retired and bought an estate in Berkshire. George Brummell was raised as a gentleman, and his father wished to provide him with every opportunity available. So, in 1786, Brummell was sent to Eton, one of England's most prestigious schools. While there, he mixed with the upper classes and became known for his incredible wit and gentlemanly behaviour. By the age of 15, he was described as having a worldly air, as well as being intellectually advanced. During his time at Eton, he developed an interest in formal dress and became known for his unique and trend-setting fashion sense. What identified Eton boys from others was their white stock or cravat. Not only did he modernise it by changing its style, but he also added a gold buckle to it. This earned him the nickname Buck while at school. In 1793, Brummell's mother died, and a year later, his father. The estate of Donington Grove was to be shared between Brummell and his two siblings. It was valued at over £60,000, which was a huge amount. When Brummell came of age, he was entitled to a third of that money. In 1794, at the age of 16, he left Eton and enrolled at Oxford University's Oriel College. At Oxford, he continued to develop men's fashion, making cotton stockings and dingy cravats an old-fashioned look. Yet, after just 1 month, Brummell left Oxford University, and in June 1794, he enlisted as a cornet in the 10th Hussars, the Prince of Wales's own regiment. The Dragoons, as they were formerly called, were very unorganised and were reputed for the lack of morals and heavy drinking habits. As well as this, the regiment would spend lots of money on fancy banquets and expensive entertainment. Another huge expense was the countless variants of uniforms, which became grander the more important the position. Brummell hoped that one day he would become an officer within the regiment, but he lacked the financial means to get there. Most of the officers came from noble families and were the heirs to great family estates. Their fortunes made Brummell's inheritance look insignificant. Despite this, he took the regiment by storm. Within a year, he was promoted to lieutenant, and it didn't take long for him to gain the favour of the Prince of Wales. The connections Brummell made in the 10th Hussars were quite fascinating. It was rare enough that a non-aristocratic boy was accepted into the Prince's own regiment, but it was unheard of that he would go on to become one of his closest friends. It's unknown when or how Brummell first came to the Prince's attention, but it's likely that it occurred while Brummell was still at Eton. On the 19th of May, 1795, George Augustus Frederick, the Prince of Wales, married Princess Caroline. Brummell supported him through this arranged marriage, which he only agreed to so Parliament would pay off his debts. Supposedly, Brummell got very drunk at the wedding and was accused of ruining the princess's honeymoon. By 1796, Brummell was promoted to the position of captain. His friendship with the prince allowed him to essentially do as he pleased, so he skipped out on most of his duties. The older officers grew extremely jealous and felt that the situation was very unjust. Brummell, a young man who was simply the general's friend, had in essence become the general. Around 2 years later, the regiment was moved to Manchester. Following this, Brummell resigned and sold his position due to his dislike of the city. For Brummell, Manchester was a boring, degenerate city with no culture. Yet, he probably left because he didn't want to lose the influence that he had over the prince. In 1799, he was finally given his inheritance. Brummell quickly moved into 4 Chesterfield Street, Mayfair, and was determined to become the best dressed gentleman in London. It didn't take long for Brummell to make his mark on men's fashion. At his Mayfair home, he would frequently host formal events, which men of great importance would attend, such as the Prince of Wales, among others. Brummell's modern looks would always make him stand out from the crowd. His dress mode consisted of perfectly tailored garments with a limited variation of colours. His style was all about elegance. He soon became famous for the intricate folds of his cravat and his dark coloured jackets. He was now London's fashion icon, and around the year 1800 he was nicknamed Beau. With Brummell having such a high position in men's fashion at the time, many tailors tried to take credit for his style. So, in order to avoid this, he made sure to work with various tailors at a time. Within London's fashion community, Brummell held a position of considerable influence. His opinion was of utmost importance, as he could easily bring someone into fashion and just as easily cut them out. Men belonging to London's highest circles needed to be able to dress the part and keep up with changing trends. This is why many wealthy, aristocratic men sought Brummell out and would ask his opinion on their dress. It was the importance of dress, as well as the use of wit, that became known as Dandyism. This attitude towards physical appearance characterized Regency England, and it was in large part down to Brummell. Within the elevated circles that he belonged to, nights out and gambling were very common. However, Brummell's problem was that his peers had significantly more wealth. For a time, he managed to avoid this unnecessary expense, and for good reason. All the money he saved went towards the ridiculous amounts that he would spend on clothing and his personal appearance. Supposedly, he would spend around £800 per annum on his fashion needs. This was a huge amount. Well, to put it into perspective, the average annual wage for a craftsman was around £50. According to Brummell, it took him 5 hours a day to get ready, from the moment he got out of bed to the moment that he was fully dressed, and supposedly he polished his boots with champagne and recommended it to others. He also paid special attention to his personal hygiene. Brummell was not only England's best dressed man, but also the best groomed. He would make sure to shave, wash, brush his teeth, and comb his hair on a daily basis, something that wasn't done too often back in the early 19th century. Due to his celebrity status, many of the upper classes followed his example. One person who would accompany Brummell during his lengthy dressing sessions and long hygiene routine was his old friend, the Prince of Wales. He would spend hours with Brummell, being amazed by his style and variety of outfits. However, with the passage of time, the Prince and Brummell started to drift apart. Brummell still socialised in London's highest circles, but little by little he became more disliked because of his rudeness. In one incident, the Duke of Bedford touched his coat. Brummell responded to this by staring at the Duke with a scrutinous eye. He then touched the fabric of the Duke's coat and said to him with a tone of pity, "Bedford, do you call this thing a coat?" Another significant display of his rudeness, that in part led to his downfall, occurred in July 1813 at a ball that he hosted along with 3 friends at Waiters Club. Due to the type of men that attended the events there, it soon became known as the Dandy Club. 2 years prior, in 1811, the Prince became the Prince Regent. It was at this moment that he started to socialise less with Brummell. At the ball, the Prince Regent greeted 2 of Brummell's friends, looked Brummell in the eye, but then proceeded to ignore him. Brummell, quite hurt by this, then said to his friend, "Alvanley, who's your fat friend?" when referring to the Prince. This incident marked the end of their friendship that was already on the decline. In most cases, losing the favour of royals and nobles almost immediately led to social doom. But this didn't happen to Brummell. His influence on fashion and friendships within other aristocratic circles meant that he managed to maintain his position in London's Regency society, despite having significantly less wealth than his counterparts. Nevertheless, within time, Brummell soon racked up huge gambling debts. He desperately tried to keep up with his friend's spending habits, but he simply wasn't rich enough. To try and maintain his lifestyle, he started to borrow money, which was only possible thanks to his status, but he had no way to pay it back. Brummell's debt came to light when a man called Richard Mailer, that had lent him money, discovered that Brummell had no intention of paying. He then went to the Dandy Club and told all that entered the situation with Brummell. He then became known as Dick the Dandy Killer. During the night of the 16th of May, 1816, Brummell, owing thousands of pounds, fled from London to escape debtor's prison. First he travelled to Dover and then on to Calais. All of this was done in the early hours of the morning, so he wouldn't be caught. In Calais, he learnt French, wrote his memoirs, and entertained guests in his apartment. Brummell had successfully managed to escape his debts, but at a price. He could no longer return to England. After years in Calais, Brummell's old friend, now King George IV, appointed him in 1830 as the British consul in Cannes. The salary was good, and he was finally able to start paying back all of his debts. Unfortunately, this wasn't to last. In 1832, the Foreign Office abolished the post, and Brummell lost all of his income. Again, he went into hiding in order to avoid debtor's prison. It was around this time that his syphilis infection started to worsen. As a young man in the army, he likely visited prostitutes, and it was this habit that led to him picking up the infection. Brummell was now poor, scruffy, and sick. With no way to pay back the money he had borrowed, he was forced into debtor's prison on the 4th of May, 1835. He looked like a completely different person from 20 years ago. It's hard to imagine that London's fashion icon could turn out the way he did. Fortunately, he wasn't in prison for long. A local grocer called George Armstrong kindly aided Brummell by travelling to London to seek monetary aid. Thanks to the charitable intervention of his old friends, he was compensated for the loss of the consulship, and in July of the same year, he was released from debtor's prison. As the syphilis progressed, Brummell began to experience pain and seizures. Eventually it led to insanity. In January 1839, he was transferred to Le Bon Sauveur Asylum on the outskirts of Caen. On the 30th of March 1840, at the age of 61, Brummell died penniless and insane from syphilis. In England, hardly anyone took notice of his death. He was buried at Cimetière Protestant in Caen. Thank you everyone for watching this video on Brummell, the dandiest man ever. If you enjoyed, please leave me a like and a comment down below. And if you're not new to the channel, why not subscribe? And if you have any more suggestions, please leave them in the comments or in my email. That will be all from me, so I'll see all of you in the next Forgotten Lives. Thanks!